Good evening. How are you? Well, it's nice out tonight. It's 72 degrees and the humidity is 52%. And the winds are again unrecognizable. Thank you, Thomas Jefferson, at 1.7 miles an hour. There are two kind of things that are rattling around in my mind, and they play into the issues of the day, but they're mentions that I haven't really heard in the universe of commentary, and they're important, I think. First off, several days ago, Roy Black, at 80 years of age, died. He was a well-known criminal defense lawyer. There was a period of time I was a member of the board of directors of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. And I listened and heard and spoke with him, and he lectured to our group. He was a very impressive lawyer. So he was mostly known, well, in the earlier years, for defending William Kennedy Smith on a rape charge. And he managed to win an acquittal, and from thence he was recognized as a powerful and effective defense attorney. So it shouldn't surprise us that years later he was involved with Jeffrey Epstein in his defense. Now, this goes back a few years, because this is back in the 2008 zone, I believe. And the earlier case was a federal case, started as a federal case, and it involved sex trafficking of teenage girls. Sound familiar? Now, here's the thing. The U.S. attorney at the time for the Southern District of Florida was Alex Costa. And in the negotiations and so forth, they made an agreement not to prosecute him in the federal court if he would agree to a prostitution charge in the state court. And that agreement would result in him spending 13 months in jail, but he wasn't actually going to spend 13 months in jail. He was going to be allowed to go out during the day and work in his office for 12 hours. And so, in fact, he was really only sleeping in the jail for the 13 months on a prostitution charge, as compared with what he did, trafficking in children, sexual trafficking in children. Now, this doesn't end, and what I'm about to say is not conclusive, but the U.S. attorney in that case in 2007, 2008, which became, instead of a federal case, a state case, he became the Labor Secretary of the United States, nominated and appointed by Mr. Trump. Now, there is a distance between the presidency of Trump, this appointment to the Labor Department, and the earlier events, because Trump wasn't on the presidential stage, if you will, until 2015. So this is the background. Now, when Acosta was nominated, there was a lot of kerfuffle about this case. How did he do this? How could this possibly happen? And the earlier Epstein case in 2000, 2008 became the focus of a lot of discussion. And I think it should be again, because there are parallels here. Now, was Trump involved at all in the 2007-8 case? Offhand, I can't find anything. Now, I didn't do one of these deep dive investigations, but that's interesting to me. But another thing that is both pertinent and interesting and has current application is the Crime Victim Rights Act, which is Title 18 U.S. Code 3771. And it requires that victims be involved in these kinds of decisions. So, they were not in the 2007-2008 period. And so this cushy agreement that defies understanding other than corruption was the basis, ultimately, of the former U.S. Attorney and Secretary of Labor going out the door. Now, what is the current application? The current application is Maxwell, who ran around basically in a craven way, identifying girls to please Epstein and others. And Epstein, of course, participated in this. And I suppose you could say it's all the worse in the current day that he had this earlier case that he ignored. But here's the question. Right now, it appears that we're watching the administration, the regime, move Maxwell from a higher security Florida containment to Texas, where she'll be at a camp. And she's not eligible to be at that camp in the sense of the duration of her sentence, too long, 20 years, and can't be there because she is a predator, excuse me. So, but here's the kicker that is the parallel between her and her co-conspirator predator. And it is that the victims have been kept in the dark, just like the public, as to what is going to be done with Maxwell. And we all prescribe it should be nothing. Meaning, she shouldn't testify, she shouldn't be released early, she shouldn't get a pardon, she should rot in jail, and we don't want her testimony because we can't believe a word she will say, because we couldn't believe a word she said before. We have judges and prosecutors and others who all say she's a liar. So, nobody talks about the elements of the Epstein case that parallel the Maxwell situation. And it feels like if we're not on these guys, and I guess gals, I tip my hat to the Attorney General, corrupt in every way, but there she is. And we have to force them to pay attention to the law, and I would hope, at the least, the survivors will cite the Victims' Rights Act and take these bastards down that way. Now, there's another thing I want to say, which is critical to the march to return our republic, as opposed to Trump's effort of a march to monarchy. And the effort was best personified by a speech in the Senate by Senator Booker from New Jersey. And I'll state it, it was simple. Two members of the Democratic caucus wanted to support a bill that Republicans support that provides for certain law enforcement funds, but get this, for states favorable to Trump, but not the others. Now, we know that Booker is from New Jersey and is not one of the preferred states. This, well, I want to say oversight, but it's not an oversight because they knew what they were doing. And Booker knew what he was doing, and he basically said, Democrats, we have to stand together against the onslaught of anti-democratic, anti-Republican, myopic dictators who would split us Democrats one from the other and the nation from the things that they deserve and are rightfully theirs, And we cannot let this go. There's nothing more important. And I've posted a link to his speech, and you can find it as well if you haven't seen it. This is the problem the Democrats have. They think this is about an election. And I hope I'm not saying this when the election's been canceled or Trump has done something to win the election, because we've already been here. The Republicans, in my opinion, didn't steal the election in a classical way. They stole it in an old school way. They had the money to advertise and destroy any human and any idea of what the true facts were for the policies that the Democrats proposed. And then combined with the Electoral College question, which is all you have to do is get the right 4 states. We can't say they had a mandate, because what they represented to the people was a lie. And we've seen that since Trump's been in office, that he's not doing what he said he would do. And that's not new. But you can't rely on an election that's corrupted by the lies that are told universally all the time by Trump and his minions. So we have to be vigilant. We have to call out the violations of the Victim Rights Act. We can't allow the summer break and mulligans on the golf course to deter us from pursuing this outrage that so encompasses all that's wrong with this administration and these people. And secondly, those of us who think of ourselves as mostly Democrats, I'm a genetic Democrat, I don't have to defer to what the party says and be loyal when they're being disloyal to me and you and everybody else. If they're not going to fight, put the pen on the desk in the Senate chamber, walk out the damn door, and don't give another political speech again, because it's just a lying sack of shit. So what we have to do is in small and large ways, if we can, write that check for ACLU, make that phone call to a neighbor, call the congressman, the senator that represents you. Just call the number and say, you better get to work. We're going to cashier you. We're going to cashier everyone who is not doing the right thing by the people of the United States. We, the people, who are the persons mentioned and for whom the Constitution was written. So that's what I got to say. And so I say good evening from my cathedral of trees, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.